Yo, Chuck.
Okay, in this video, I am going to describe the var, let, and const keywords used to describe variables, and then I'm going to kind of explain little pros and cons about each. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate the idea of hoisting real fast. When people talk about hoisting, they're talking about the var and the function keyword most of the time, okay? So these two keywords are hoisted and initialized before the code actually executes if they're declared. So if I said var dog equals rover, and before it is declared, I try to log what dog is, the variable dog, it returns undefined in the console. This is because the var keyword is hoisted, or it is dragged to the top of its parent scope and initialized. But notice that there is no value in dog yet, it's just initialized, so that's why it returns undefined. Okay? Additionally, the same can be said about functions. So if I made a function called doStuff, and then I'm going to say console.log, yo, brah, I did stuff. Now I'm going to call the function before it's even been declared. And notice it still works. There's no error. That's because the function keyword is hoisted to the top of its scope right here, okay? Now I'm going to comment out this code. I'll make another function that will not be will not use the function keyword. I'll just use const do you smoke. And this is going to console.log smoking or nah. Now let me try and execute this function before it's declared. Let's see what happens. Notice it's not defined. So the const keyword and the let keyword are actually still get hoisted as well, but they are not initialized, and you can't do that with those keywords. Therefore, this is going to get an error. The hoisting idea is kind of problematic in your code, and it can make a lot of errors, and makes it hard to debug things. So it's best not to have hoisting. It's another reason the var keyword has been phased out. Okay, real quick, I want to talk about global scope versus function scope of the var keyword. So if I have the var keyword and I make a variable called skateboarder equal to Tony Hawk, this variable is now in the global scope, which means I can console.log skateboarder and I get Tony Hawk. Cool. Now let's say I make a function, let's call it greeting, and I'm going to console.log skateboarder. I'll say hello skateboarder, just like that. Now I'll call the function greeting. So I'm going to call it, and what do you know, it works. We would expect this because in JavaScript, due to the lexical scoping of the language, we're able to pull from an inner function is able to pull from its parent scope, which in this case is the global scope where we've declared this variable of Tony Hawk. Okay, we know that's how that works. It seems kind of intuitive. What's not intuitive, perhaps, is let's make another variable inside our function. So this is going to be a functionally scoped variable. Let's call this celebrity and equal to The Rock. So if I was to come out here my global scope and console.log celebrity, what do you think is going to happen? I get a reference error because celebrity is not defined. Celebrity is actually in a functional scope, and I'm trying to use it in the global scope, which is not allowed in JavaScript. So that's a quick demonstration of a globally scoped versus functionally scoped variable, and that applies to the var keyword. So a quirk of the var keyword is you can actually describe or declare a variable like twice or multiple times and it won't give you an error. So let's make a variable called smoking equals false. I'm going to log out smoking. And as you would imagine, it consoles out false. I can just come in here and do smoking again if I do the proper syntax and set it to true. And it lets me do that, which is really weird because I'm redeclaring the variable again. And I could just endlessly do this and it'll keep updating the value. What happens if I put it to the top? It's, again, hoisting's happening, so that makes sense, but it's still like a weird behavior that I'm able to keep redeclaring the smoking variable because that could really screw up your code. You could declare a variable on accident, twice when you didn't mean to and change the whole result of your code. So it's kind of like a not a very good thing to exist, and that's kind of why the let and const keywords, one of the reasons they've come into play. So let's comment out this code. I'll make another variable called let, let's say drinking equals true. If I console log drinking, I get true. Let's do the same behavior where we redeclare the variable and I'll set it to false. Notice it's already been declared and I get that redeclare error. Same thing with the const. Well, you couldn't even do it with const anyways because const is just a constant value, so this wouldn't work. But just notice the weird quirk of the var keyword and how it allows you to redeclare variables. That is problematic. Okay, so the let keyword is the new variable declaration kit on the block, or it's not really that new, but it's one of them. And it allows you to set a variable like dog equal to rover, and then I can't redeclare dog like this. This will give me an error. As you can see, it's already been declared, but I can't update the variable dog with the let keyword. Okay, cool. So it'll let you update, but you cannot redeclare. Another big thing about the let keyword that's so cool is it is block scoped. Meaning, if you have those brackets and you declare the let variable inside of those brackets, it is confined to that scope. So if you set a function like do stuff let alcoholic equal true, and if I was to come out here and console.log alcoholic, I'll get a reference error because it's not defined outside of its block scope. That seems kind of intuitive. Another thing that's weird about let is it's actually hoisted, as I mentioned in the earlier video, but it is not initialized like a var keyword would be, so you will get an error. So it gives you the impression that it's not hoisted, but yes, actually let and const are hoisted. Okay, so that's one of the main features of let. Another thing that's cool about let is you can declare a variable but without initializing it. So I'm not giving this cat any value, but I can just declare it like that. Now if I was to log this, it'll just say undefined, but it's not prompting me to give this cat variable a value. So for the const keyword, this is actually what JavaScript developers recommend you use when naming most of your variables. So if we had a variable like Kurt Cobain equals grunge, because we declared this variable with the const keyword, the assumption is we can no longer update it. So if I try to say Kurt Cobain equals heroin and return that, I will get an error because I'm trying to assign to a constant variable, which you cannot do. So it's just like the let keyword as well, where it is block scoped. It cannot be redeclared, so this would still not work as well. It's already been declared. You get an error trying to do that. And again, it's kind of tricky, but const, just like let, is actually hoisted, but it's not initialized. And I think the interesting thing about the const variable declaration is you have to initialize it for it to work. So for instance, I could say let age and then var name. I'm just declaring these variables without initializing them, and nothing bad will happen. But if I did const poopies, this will give an error because I need to initialize every const that I declare. So that is a unique property of the const keyword. Okay, in this video, I am going to describe the var, let, and const keywords used to describe variables, and then I'm going to kind of explain little pros and cons about each. Okay, let's get started. There you have it. I described var, let, and const. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.